Good evening, everybody. A late edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on Patriots Press Pass. Evan Lazar, Alex Barth with you on this Monday night. And Alex, we have been thrown off a little bit by the schedule here this week for the Patriots, practicing later in the afternoon, a 3:30 start time to practice yesterday and today. We'll also be in the stadium on Tuesday for a 3:30 practice as well. But I wanted to start with the quarterbacks as we normally do, because I thought today, in terms of reps against ones versus ones, right? Starters versus starters, and B, that situational 2-minute at the end of practice was probably the first time where we've seen a live 2-minute drill in practice so far in full pads. So a turn up, I would say, of this quarterback competition in general of situational football, which we know third downs, 2-minute red zone, a lot of what's going to come down. That's what this quarterback competition, I think, is really going to come down to when it's all said and done. Both QBs can look good between the 20s, throwing balls against the scout team defense, right? But what happens when we line up the ones versus the ones and go into it in a situation where Bill Belichick shouts out, okay, offense, you're down by 6 points. You have to drive the field to score a touchdown and kick the PAT to win the game. You got a minute and 55 seconds. One timeout, no timeouts, whatever it has to be. Let's roll the ball out and see what happens. And that's sort of what we got at the end of practice here tonight.
We did, and it was a good mix too. You know, this is a kind of related but also separate takeaway from today's practice. For the last 3 sessions outside of that Friday walkthrough, which is kind of its own thing,
right?
Mac Jones heavily, almost 2-1, out-repped Cam Newton.
Yeah.
Cam Newton had the edge today in volume, 17-14. Yeah. Mac Jones had the higher completion percentage, but okay, so Mac was getting all the snaps, right? We were talking about, okay, some people thought maybe that was him running away from the job, but for the most part, it was, okay, they want to get him the reps now. They want to give him the Cam's the guy, and there's not going to be reps, right?
Yeah.
Well, today it really felt like, hey, let's give both these guys the same situation. See who's better. Today didn't, and I know Bill says that the teaching period, and he calls the beginning of camp the teaching period. I know he says the teaching period is done once the pads come on. Today really felt like a competitive, an evaluation. That's the word I'm looking for. Today really felt like an evaluation and not instruction.
Absolutely. And Belichick before practice mentioned we got basically 2 more training camp practices, if you will, today and tomorrow. And then they're going to really start to get into what a game week is going to look like, right? In terms of this week against Washington, maybe not so much. We're still kind of in training camp mode. Next week, they have the joint practices with the Eagles, but it sounds like they're going to really try to fake install a game plan, sort of, right? And sort of take the team through that process. So today it certainly felt like in full pads, live contact situations, like you said, the competition kind of began today. And I'm not just talking about the quarterback position, right? We're talking about every position across the board. And it was so interesting to see Cam versus the starters, then Mac versus the starters, then Cam Mac in a 2-minute, then Cam in a 2-minute. And that really, as you said, made it feel like they were pitting those two guys against each other today and to really see who is going to come out the other end. So let's discuss what we actually did see. So I mentioned that Mac also took some reps against the starting defense. He was 4 of 7 with a drop. So I guess you can call it 4 of 6 against the starting defense. Cam Newton was 6 of 12 with a drop. So 6 of 11 and an interception by Adrian Phillips. Do you want to start with Mac or Cam? Which one do we want to start with today? You.
Cam's thrown first, most of Cam. So let's go with the pattern the Patriots are going with. Let's start with Cam.
All right. So I thought that Cam made three really good throws in this practice. One of them was early on against the scout team. I'll get to that one in a second. The first one was obviously that wheel route to James White with Kyle Van Noy in coverage. Really well placed ball over the shoulder, drop it in the bucket type of throw. That play looked really well done by Cam, right? You notice that you got a linebacker on James White. They had the matchup. They had the single high safety in the middle of the field. Not going to be a factor. Let's float it up there and see if James White can make a play on it. And that's exactly what happened. The other throw that I thought was really nice was actually on the surface a wide open throw. And that was early on in practice. I believe this might have been against the scout team as well. Jonnu Smith broke open in the middle of the field. It looked like some sort of a coverage bust in the middle of the field. And Jonnu Smith was wide open. But Cam was looking down the right sideline on his first read in the progression. Jonnu Smith was running up the left seam, and he was able to get off of his first read and see Jonnu running open in the middle of the field and hit him for a touchdown. So that throw was a really well kind of time throw, right? Of actually getting to the backside of the progression quickly and being able to read that out, that bust was happening and see that and make that play instinctively. That wasn't a first read type of throw. That was a throw that he had to be able to innately see on the field and see that there was some sort of a situation going on over there with the coverage and be able to beat it. And then the third throw that I thought was nice, it was also early on in practice. Kendrick Bourne was crossing over the middle. I believe it was Anthony Jennings who was going to try to light up Kendrick Bourne, not literally because we're in practice, so they're not actually going to light the guy up. But instead of leading him into Anthony Jennings, Cam kind of threw it a little bit behind Kendrick Bourne and sort of protected the receiver from the hit coming over the middle. So again, a lot of those throws I think that we're seeing, I don't know if Cam makes those first two throws I mentioned, the wheel route to James White, which was perfectly placed. I'm not sure he makes that throw, and I'm not sure he gets to Jonnu Smith in the progression last year.
Yeah, and there's been throughout camp, I just think there's chemistry. You can call it timing, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Cam never had the kind of chemistry with any of these receivers last year, outside of maybe Jacoby Myers, that it looks like he's building. I actually thought with Jonnu Smith, with Hunter Henry, I thought he was building really great chemistry with Hunter Henry. Henry obviously didn't practice today. He's been banged up. Doesn't sound like it's anything overly serious, but there's other guys too. Kendrick Bourne, Jonnu Smith, like the play you were talking about. I think that he's on the same page as these guys, which he wasn't last year. And that can make a difference. That can absolutely make a difference.
Yeah. So then that's the good side of Cam. And I feel like the good is still heavily outweighing the bad, but we talk about the good and the bad with everybody. So we're continuing to talk about it with Cam. I think what you did see, the interception was the interception, right? He threw it a little bit behind Jonnu Smith. Adrian Phillips was in really good position to make a play on the ball, and he's able to step in front of Jonnu Smith and pick it off, right? And those are the types of throws that you definitely would like to see Cam throw the ball away, scramble, do something else with it, right? And try to force it. But those types of plays happen in an NFL game.
So here's why that one was interesting to me. There was a play last year, Evan, I think we fought about this play a ton, where I want to say it was against the Jets, but I'm not positive. Yeah, Devin Asiasi open in the flat. You know what play I'm talking about? And he kind of lobbed it to him. Instead of just zipped it to him. And I think, did it end up being intercepted or it was incomplete on a third down? It was some sort of consequential play. Anyway, similar route. And Cam zipped it. I mean, that's one of the hardest thrown balls I've seen him throw all camp. Now, Adrian Phillips read it incredibly well, reacted quickly, got in position, picked it off. But I've talked about this before on the show too. An interception, sometimes you need context to that. There's completions that are bad throws. There's interceptions that are good throws. I'm not saying that was a good throw, but hey, he figured out how to read that play and make the throw. He wasn't doing that last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And the other throw that I thought that he just missed, and look, you're going to have some of these just misses too, but he had N'Keal Harry on a deep post pattern. N'Keal Harry, and I can't believe I'm saying this, and we're going to talk about N'Keal a little bit later on. N'Keal Harry blew by Michael Jackson. He actually ran right by Michael Jackson and was wide open down the middle of the field on a deep post pattern, and Cam just overthrew him. He just overshot him. And I think that those moments, the interception, the overshot ball to N'Keal Harry, that should have been a touchdown. those are sort of the next step type of plays, right? The consistency, right? Of every throw being a good throw, every decision being a better decision. You're seeing a much better Cam Newton, but I think that 11 training camp practices in, as you would expect, there's still a ways to go before it gets to the point where I'm comfortable with saying that Cam is all the way back, right? I think he's certainly better than he was last year, but light years ahead of where he was last year mentally. But in order for Cam to truly be all the way back, especially that throw to N'Keal Harry, he's got to have that one, right? I mean, N'Keal is wide open behind the defense for an easy touchdown, and he just leads them too far. And Harry tried to make a diving catch on it, but just even he wasn't long enough to get there. So that's the type of throw there. That was a layup, a deep ball layup, and you got to have that one. It's a wide open three, right? You got to be able to make those.
Yeah, and that's, Summit Camp, and N'Keal Harry's bailed him out on a couple of them. He's actually made some really good catches, but it seems like there was a period where he had those touch throws going early in camp, but you're starting to see a little more of it that he did last year where, they're at the 5, 6, 7 yard line. He just needs to drop one in, rainbow it into the back corner, and he throws it 2 rows up in the stands. You're starting to see a little more of that again. As opposed to the beginning of camp where it felt like he had that touch pass figured out.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to Mac. And I think the big caveat with Mac, and we're going to talk about the 2-minute drill anyways, but let's talk about the 2-minute drill first, and then let's talk about the big caveat. All right.
Make up your mind.
2-minute drill. I know, I'm all over the place. It's late. 2-minute drill, Mac Jones, the 2s against the 2s, right? Mac Jones is running the backup offense versus the backup defense. But he goes 4 for 4 with 4 very on-time, on-target passes, caps it off with a beautiful back shoulder ball to Marvin Hall, where, it was Justin Bethel in coverage. Justin Bethel's a special teamer. He's not a starting corner in the NFL, but that ball could not have been put on a platter any better for Marvin Hall than where Mac Jones put it. So in those situations, and we talk about situational football and how important those moments are for Bill Belichick. Well, Mac Jones passed the test tonight with flying colors, going 4 for 4 in that 2-minute drill, and really just driving the offense right through the scout team defense. And he's also throwing to Marvin Hall, right? And Gunnar Olszewski. So as much as you want to say it's against the backup defense, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
I was going to say, if I can do 15 seconds on Marvin Hall, he had, before that catch, he had a couple of really bad drops. Did I say this to you or not? I said it to somebody.
I don't know.
Marvin Hall is store brand Ted Ginn. That's kind of what it feels like. And, let Gunner's coming along. Gunner's coming along as a wide receiver. Marvin Hall, it speaks to how good that throw was, because he was a guy who was clearly struggling today. He, for whatever reason today, he couldn't catch the football. And Mac put the ball, he spotted it so perfectly that Marvin Hall had no choice but to catch it.
Right. So as much as you want to sit here and say, and this is the caveat I was talking about, it's the backup defense. It's the scout team defense, right? He's not going up against J.C. Jackson and John Jones and Dante Hightower and all these players, although he did go up against those guys at times in practice and went 4 for 6 with a drop. So you factored all those things in with this 2-minute drill equation. But at the same time, I don't know how I feel about it, honestly, because he is throwing to Marvin Hall, not Nelson Aguilar, and he is throwing to Matt Lacoste or David Wells or whatever, and not Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry, right? So he's turning these other players around him into very good players all of a sudden against the scout team. And he's doing exactly what you would want to see your first round quarterback do against the scout team, which is light up the scout team, right? You want to see your first round QB go 4 for 4 and lead the offense right down the field and score a touchdown against the scout team defense. And that's exactly what Mac Jones is doing. So how do you hold that against him? They're putting him out there against the scout team defense, and he's making plays. That's exactly what you want to see.
Right. I mean, if he wasn't doing it, that's reason for concern. You can't hold it against him. The other thing is, you have to know what you're talking about to be able to do this. But not to, I don't mean that to be derogatory. It's just that if you really know what you're looking for, There's things you can evaluate regardless of the defense and, frankly, regardless of the wide receivers, right? Things like ball placement. The defensive back's going to be in a spot. Okay, Marvin Hall didn't beat Justin Bethel that bad that he was all alone. Things like footwork. Doesn't matter who's on the field. Your footwork's your footwork, right? The command at the line of scrimmage. Scout team might be the scout team, but they know where they're going. They're all in the right spots. It's up to him to recognize it. Who the players are doesn't matter. It's how they're aligned. There's things you can, like, just because he's facing the scout team doesn't mean you throw those reps out. You know, if he's facing the scout team and there's certain things he does in there that are valuable. I'm not going to, like, okay, so he beats so-and-so with a back shoulder throw. All right, that defensive back probably didn't know how to get in position, but ball placement, footwork, command at the line of scrimmage, doesn't matter who the defense is. Those are important elements of the quarterback's game, and you can evaluate Mac Jones or Cam Newton in the same setting up against the scout team defense. Those aren't just total trash reps. It's not. Yeah. People act like going against the scout team is going against air. It's not. You're going up against NFL football players, and I don't care if you're the 90th man on the roster. The 90th man on the Patriots roster is a hell of a lot more talented than the random guys on the street people think they are.
Yeah.
Those reps mean something.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that throw that he had on the goal line to Christian Wilkerson, where he felt pressure off the right side and he was able to just sort of step up and elude the rush just a little bit. And he kind of almost jumped past it and sort of threw it to Wilkerson on a little under router, kind of like an in cut, short yard, 3-4 yard in cut, right on the goal line. And you just see every once in a while, and this I wouldn't even say it's every once in a while. I'd say once or twice a practice, we see this innate ability by Mac Jones to move around the pocket, right? He's not a scrambler. He's not fast. He's not Cam Newton in the open field by any means, but he makes these subtle movements. And what I wrote in my notebook was when we had the other quarterback down in Tampa up here, the dude down in Tampa, as I called him, right? When he was up here, those types of little movements in the pocket and just that little sidestep or that little kind of climb in the pocket and move to your right. We used to laud him for those, right? Tom Brady, right? That's the Brady pocket magic, right? And I'm not comparing Mac to Brady, but I am just saying that those moments are exactly what you see out of Mac Jones, is that he just has a feel and an ability to make those little quick twitch movements inside the pocket to maneuver around the rush and then make the throw. So that play to Wilkerson beat Mike Jackson inside on the goal line for a touchdown. Mac feels the rush coming off the right side. He just kind of bobs and weaves up a little bit, gets outside the pocket just a tad, and then makes the throw. Boom. That's exactly what you want to see. So I see a lot of that with Mac as well. That ability to just move within that like 6x6 box in the pocket, right? It's not necessarily that he's getting out and he's scrambling or he's Russell Wilson and he's running all over the place. It's just that little bit of quick movements in the pocket that's allowing him to avoid the rush, and he works the pocket extremely well.
Yeah, there was one down in the red zone. This was a little more than just shuffling in the pocket, but there was one play down in the red zone. It wasn't during the 2-minute drill, but it was competitive 11s. And he rolls out to his right. And, I mean, everything's covered. So he's waiting. There was some maneuvering in the pocket. He rolls out to his right, starts redirecting Christian Wilkerson towards the sideline. Wilkerson picks him up, goes, and just a beautifully placed ball. Not an easy catch for Wilkerson. He has to come back to it and dive. But that's where you throw that ball, because the defender's right on his back, and you throw it low. Either Wilkerson's going to go down and dive and make the catch, or it's going to be incomplete. There's no chance the defender can make a play on that ball. That throw. I mean, that's the kind of thing like you talk about, where those are the kind of plays that Tom Brady made that made this offense go, that made this specific offensive system go. And it was really refreshing. And that was back-to-back plays, actually, because the play before he'd rolled the other way and it was a bit more exaggerated of a scramble, but you see him like redirecting receivers and stuff too. That goes to what I talked about before, the confidence, all of that. But yeah, that was one of those throws where, you know, there's a lot of talk about how mobile really is Mac Jones, how athletic really is Mac Jones. He's not going to give you what Cam Newton gives you in the running game, but he's not a statue either. he can make the little movements that extend plays, and that matters. That makes a difference.
Just great at the details, right? Pocket manipulation, even just watching him out at practice. And I know everybody's going to be like, Evan, stop it. But even watching him throw screens out at practice to the running backs, right? The fakes, the footwork on the screens, the way that he throws the ball, kind of just the whole thing just looks smooth when he does it, right? Whether it's a screen pass or a downfield throw, mechanics in the pocket. You love to see these types of things, especially from a young quarterback. And I am really excited. And this has nothing to do with benching Cam or anything like that. But I'm really excited to see, even if the plan remains to start Cam, at least to start the season, if the Patriots, especially next week when we get into the joint practices in Philadelphia, give Mac more and more opportunities against the starters. Because if he goes out there and he performs like he does against the scout team, and he's even close to that good against the starters, then you really start to get excited, right? So I think that you have to evaluate him against the starters a little bit more moving forward. That doesn't mean you have to take the job from Cam Newton, but it's just important, especially this time of year, because once you commit to Cam as the starter during the regular season, practice is going to be heavily Cam Newton's practice, right? You're not going to, if you're starting that quarterback on Sunday, you're not going to work out Mac Jones the same way that they're working him out in training camp. So now's the time to give Mac those reps against the starters. I mentioned he threw 7 passes against the starters today. Let's see it happen more and more and more, I think, because they got to see what they have in him already, and maybe he's even better than they kind of expected at this point.
Yeah, I think the joint practices, I've said this before, I've gone on this rant, I won't do the whole thing. I think the joint practices are it. I think that's the ultimate decider. I think we're really going to, he's playing well, and that's nice, and that's great, and it's not nothing. I just went on that whole rant about don't dismiss scout team reps, but the joint practices are really going to tell us where this kid is at, because the Patriots only have so many defensive calls in their playbook. And the same goes, I mean, this goes for everybody. This isn't just Mac Jones. You face your own enough and you can pick up on patterns. You can pick up on habits. You can cheat a little bit. Let's see when he faces something he's truly never faced before. And let's see how he looks then. That's kind of the next step, and a big step for Mac Jones.
Yeah, a really fun practice for both quarterbacks. I thought both quarterbacks played pretty well today, but just the intensity and sort of the coaching kind of took a step back a little bit today, especially late in practice when Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, you could really tell they sort of just, McDaniels was relaying plays in the headset like he would in a game, and they were not coaching. Right? There was no cards being held up. There was no hands-on coaching. It was really live, 2-minute, roll the ball out and see what the players can do. Let's evaluate ourselves. 11 practices in. Similarly to that, as we move off the quarterbacks now, we can start talking about the defensive linemen. I think had a really nice practice today against the offensive line. Alex, we got a live red zone goal line run period, right? Where they tried to punch it in from the 2 4 straight times. The defense stopped them on 3 of them, 3 out of 4. I think that group up front is really starting to make some headway on the defensive line in that core group of guys, Guy, Godshaw, Anderson, Wise, and Barmore, obviously, with the 6th guy, Carl Davis, really starting to solidify himself, I think, as somebody that's, at least in the early going, I keep saying that. It's really not that early. We're halfway through.
Halfway through, yeah. Well, yeah, it's early and it's not. It's early and it's not.
Because we haven't had a game yet. But Carl Davis is, I think, definitely playing his way onto the team. Bill Belichick spoke about him this morning or this afternoon before practice and said he fits our system. He's having a really good camp. I think that he's trending towards making this team. But that 3 for 4 for the defense was really impressive. Nick Thurman having a couple of plays in the backfield as well.
Yeah, he has. And I'll tell you this. I just really wish we could see more Christian Barmore. He's dealing with some sort of injury, and he's been on and off the field. But when he's out there, man, nobody can block him. None of these veterans can block him. You want to talk about scout team reps? He's going up against the presumed starters and dominating as a rookie. We'll see what happens with the injuries, and it's certainly a cause for concern. But yeah, a lot of these guys are off to hot starts. They kind of have to be because Christian Barmore is coming for their playing time. He looks every bit the part of a true 3-down game plan terrorizing nose tackle.
Yeah, he had a rep against Alex Redmond in one-on-ones, and I know Alex Redmond's not exactly
Redmond, there's scout team, and there's I try to be very positive. You know me. I try to be very positive about everything. I don't know that there's a player that's had a worse camp than Alex Redmond.
He got put on absolute skates by Christian Barmore in a one-on-one rep, and Barmore just got got his hands inside to his chest and just straight power, right? And knocked him back. And you see with Barmore, the hand strength, he's got really, really heavy hands. And he's a big dude, and he's got good explosiveness and good power. And all of these things, I don't know what it was. I don't want to speculate because I really have no clue why he dropped out of the first round. But this is a guy, as we've seen at every single practice that he's been at, and even when, like today, he kind of was in and out, right, a little bit because of the injury that he's dealing with. We just hear so much. You see so much of Christian Barmore just absolutely dominating the opponent at times with hand usage, strength, explosiveness off the ball, speed to power, bull rushing ability, but also some finesse moves as well. There's just so many things going on that I really, really like about Christian Barmore. And it continues to be a head scratcher to me how a guy that talented falls out of the first round, but the Patriots are the beneficiaries of it.
Well, so some of it he's a very scheme specific player. I think that there are certain teams that as talented as he would have had to rework their defense for him. And I don't know that there's a player in the draft that's that good. There's players in the league that are that good, but nobody in the draft is that good.
Right.
Some of it too. And I mean, he played through a lot of it, but he was banged up at times in college. And so now you're kind of seeing it. And that's probably, I still thought he'd be a back end of the first round guy. I thought, a team like, before the Chiefs paid Chris Jones, I thought that was a lock, but there's a reason they moved up to get him. There absolutely is, and we're seeing it.
Absolutely. And I just want to circle back real quick to two more guys on the defensive line. Henry Anderson has been great.
He had a very good day today.
Yeah, he had a very good day. He's in the mix heavily. He also had a great rep. I think it was against Yadni Kajus, if I remember correctly, that just put Yadni Kajus absolutely on skates, similar to the rep with Barmore and Alex Redmond. Yadni Kajus probably not making this team based off of what we've seen through 11 practices. But yeah, I know. Henry Anderson, though, really strong, really stout. I mentioned Carl Davis, who I think is going to be a sneaky guy to make this roster, kind of a dark horse guy. But between that core group, this is just an immovable object. Like, there are just times, and then you start throwing Judon on the edge there, on the strong side edge.
Would they be the unstoppable force, and the offensive line would be the immovable object?
Yes, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't want your defensive line to not be able to move.
Well, no, they're a very difficult.
I know what you're saying. I'm screwing with you. Keep going. It's 10 o'clock.
Okay. So Devon Godshaw, Lauren, it was from going left to right? Or left, right. Yeah, whatever. Devon Godshaw in the middle, Lawrence Guy, Matt Judon. And they tried to run it at that side off the left side of the offensive line, and it just went nowhere. Like, just nowhere, they literally did not move Guy, Godshaw, or Judon an inch off the ball. And we're talking about Isaiah Wynn and Mike Onwenu trying to move those guys down the field, and it just did not give an inch. And you just look at this group up front, and as a trenches guy, you just absolutely love these battles, right? Like, you're getting Wynn and Onwenu and Mason and Brown and Andrews. Andrews wasn't out there today, but Karras, if it's not Andrews, or James Ferentz, who's actually had a decent camp so far, but that's a sidebar, against this defensive line. And it is just, this is real football, right? Like, this is big boy trenches football. And it's great to see out there in these padded practices. I'm like giddy talking about it.
Yeah, I little brief Patriots breaking news here. Tomorrow's practice at 4 instead of 3:30.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
No, I think this defensive front's going to be special. We've said this since March. They had one of the worst groups under Belichick last year. And, some of that was injuries. Some of that was opt-outs. It kind of just piled up on them. But Bill Belichick came out and he overcorrected this year. If there's one thing I can tell you for sure about the 2021 Patriots, they will not be run on. They will win in the trenches. They will not be run on. Bill Belichick made sure of that with his offseason acquisitions, and you're seeing that play out now in training camp.
Absolutely. All right. One more defensive lineman to talk about here for me, and then we're going to move over to some of the skill positions because I know that everybody likes that a little bit more for the most part. Dietrich Wise, I thought, had his best practice at camp so far today. He had a sack and 11 on 11s working with Dante Hightower in sort of a big play. He beat Isaiah Wynn in one-on-ones, and that's not easy to do. Isaiah Wynn doesn't lose a whole lot of pass protection one-on-ones, right? Like that's sort of his bread and butter. He beat him clean with a rip move right around the edge. He signed a 4-year, $20 million or $22 million deal, something like that. And you kind of scratched your head just a little bit, I think, on that deal and said, wow, Dietrich Wise getting some paid, some good money by the Patriots. Today, he was a very, very good player out there today. And you started to see some of the unblockable reps from Dietrich Wise, and you like to see that. And this whole group is sort of just coming together. But he's a player, very good hand usage, good length, obviously, and good experience in the system. But today was his best practice so far.
Yeah, he didn't. I don't know that he got off to the start, especially after that contract, that maybe you'd like to see. Anybody who heard my Felger and Maz appearance last week knows how I felt about that. But yeah, he's had a few really good practices here, and he's always kind of been a guy that, a game day player. He's always been a guy that looks better on game day than on the practice field. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
I can't quantify it for you, but I feel like every year Dietrich, like this is the first year we're not talking about Dietrich Wise maybe being cut, right? That was the thing every year where Dietrich Wise was like the hot cut of camp, and then he never got cut, and he'd show up in games and you'd be like, why were they going to cut this guy? So obviously with that new contract, he avoids being, the hot cut this year. But yeah, he's always been a guy that's kind of, turned up the tempo once you get a little closer to the season. So maybe that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, good practice for him. Do we want to go JJ Taylor and N'Keal Harry? I'm leaving it up to you.
Either way, I get to plug my roster projection I posted this morning on 98.5thesportshub.com. You can check that out. I had both of those guys off the roster.
That's sort of why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
We talked a lot.
You read my roster projection. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about N'Keal. Let's talk about JJ Taylor, who I thought had his best play of camp today, the 7-on-7 catch from Mac Jones, little wheel route down the left sideline in between two players, two defenders in coverage. It was on the far side of the field, so I didn't see who the two defenders were. But Mac dropped it in there. JJ Taylor made a nice catch. That was kind of the moment that we've been waiting to see in practice from JJ Taylor, especially as a pass catcher coming out of the backfield, right? Make an explosive play as a pass catcher. You got even Sony Michel made a big play in the passing game today from Mac Jones in the 2-minute drill. So JJ Taylor finally makes a little bit of a play there. He has been working closely with both punt returners and kick returners in practice, but I wrote about this today as well in my notebook, and you wrote about it on your roster projection. They got 6 running backs right now, right? And Brandon Bolden's not going to get cut. So that you're guaranteed, I think, those 4 guys. Maybe Ramondre Stevenson ends up catching the Foxborough flu here at some point, just because Ivan Fears has talked about how far behind the 8 ball Ramondre Stevenson has been. But if you put Ramondre Stevenson on IR before roster cutdowns, you better hope that you have good health at the running back position all year long, right? Sony Michel, Damian Harris are going to have to stay healthy for the entire duration unless they're going to run out of gas, or they're going to run out of depth, I should say. So I think that there's almost a guarantee that those 5 guys are going to make the team. The only exception might be Ramondre Stevenson getting completely redshirted and ending up on injured reserve. But assuming those 5 guys make the team, you also have to factor in the fullback a little bit into just numbers game, right? And if Jakob Johnson's going to make it, especially with Dalton Keene going on IR, you got to think that there's a pretty good chance that Johnson's going to make the team now. So are they going to carry 6 running backs, 7 backfield players? Is there a spot for JJ Taylor, who hasn't exactly had the best or really the flashiest of camps? I'm not going to sit here and say that he's necessarily been terrible or anything like that, but today was the first day where he really made a play that said, oh, wow, there's JJ Taylor. Now, the other thing about this is that Ivan Fears has talked about in the past that JJ Taylor is a game player, right? He's a gamer. The light comes on in the game for him. So maybe we talk about Friday morning when we do the podcast after Thursday night's preseason game against Washington, maybe JJ Taylor has a huge game, right? Maybe JJ Taylor has a huge game against the Eagles or against the Giants, and that's the JJ Taylor game, and that's the JJ Taylor moment. But right now, so far through 11 practices, he's basically made one notable play the entire training camp, and that was today.
I mean, I would say Ralph Webb had a game too.
Right.
I just, has JJ Taylor played well enough to get on the roster? Yeah, absolutely. More than 53 players have. That's the thing. It doesn't exist in a bubble. Maybe the Patriots keep 6 running backs with JJ Taylor. Maybe they keep 6 wide receivers with N'Keal Harry. Maybe they keep 4 in the tight end room with Jakob Johnson because that's where he fits in. Are they going to carry 6 backs, 6 wide receivers, and 4 tight ends? Absolutely not. You can't keep 14 players between those 3 positions. You just can't do it. So that's where this gets tough, and that's what it comes down to. I think a lot of it is Harry or Taylor. Those 2 guys might be fighting for one spot. It could be very well the case. You got to remember that these positional battles we talk about, some of them are actually more just ultimate roster battles, and they exist across positions. You could throw in the 7th or 8th offensive lineman here. Could be that guy instead, JJ Taylor. Do you keep an extra guy on the defensive front? Is this Rashad Berry's spot? Is he competing with JJ Taylor?
Right.
There's all these different ways to go with it. And it's not that JJ Taylor hasn't played well enough. It's that there's probably 10 to 15 guys in my mind. I was thinking about this yesterday, Evan. Actually, let me ask you this, because I'm going to go through and research it and actually figure out the number. But I'm going to workshop an idea here. Picture the March Madness tournament, right?
Okay.
Certain spots, 64 spots in the tournament. They're all obviously up for grabs, but some of them are given. Your conference champions, etc. How many and then there's the at-large spots. How many at-large spots are there on an NFL roster? What I mean by that is all 53 spots have to be earned, but 2 spots are going to quarterbacks. I'd say at least 3 are going to running backs. At least 2 are going to tight ends. At least 4 are going to wide receivers. You see where You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, sure.
How many true at-large roster spots are there on an NFL roster? Because those are the spots JJ Taylor, N'Keal Harry, Jakob Johnson. Those are the spots these guys are fighting for, and it's less than you think. It's not a lot.
Especially on
none, but it's not a lot.
Especially on this roster, I think maybe when you really start to whittle it down and sort of look at it that way, right, that you just presented, which I think is a cool way to look at it, we're talking about maybe 5, right, roster spots that are truly up for grabs, because you got all these free agents and all these veterans that are under contract that have guaranteed money on their deals. All these guys are making the team, right? We just talked about Dietrich Weiss. Whether Dietrich Weiss had a good camp or a bad camp, he was making the team, right? Because they gave him guaranteed money. So he's in the squad. Right.
Another example, I think, is to go back to the March Madness example. The winner, I don't know, what's a really bad basketball conference? The Big Sky, is that even still a thing? I don't know. The winner of the Big Sky is not one of the 64 best teams in college basketball, but they have an auto bid, so they're going to make it. Right now, either Juwan Williams or Michael Jackson is going to make this team, because the Patriots need the numbers. That's the Big Sky, or maybe it's an external option, but that's the Big Sky of the roster. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
that spot. Yeah, JJ Taylor's been better than Juwan Williams and Michael Jackson. But one of those 2 guys is going to make the team because the numbers dictate it. That's not JJ Taylor's competition. Right.
I just, when I look at JJ Taylor, I think that we all love the idea of JJ Taylor, right? He's a lot of people thought that maybe he had the potential to be the successor to James White. He looked really good in the games last year when he did get in there, showed some bursts, showed some elusiveness. I do think he's got some kick return ability. I wouldn't put him back there on punt returns, not that they would anyways with Gunner on the team, but I don't know if I think he's so safe there, but he's definitely safe, I think, in terms of having some ability to return kickoffs. And I think that in these preseason games, he's going to get some opportunity to be back there. But if you're going to make the team as JJ Taylor, like you mentioned, with 5 truly at-large roster spots, as you put it, and 5 running backs that are definitely solidified on the roster, unless something funky happens with Ramondre Stevenson, you're going to have a heck of a summer, right? Like, you're going to have to go out there and ball out in training camp. And we're just not quite seeing that from JJ Taylor. So I hope that is coming for him, because I do think he's a good football player. But at some point, it's going to be difficult for him to make the team. And then you do wonder, they had who was it? DJ Foster a few years ago. Right. That a lot of people thought the same thing about that. And maybe he is a DJ Foster and he's not a James White, right? Like not right. There's not a whole lot of James Whites. So, or maybe like a Danny Woodhead would be sort of a better comparison for JJ Taylor, because James White is a little bit unfair expectation. Right. So regardless, it needs to come faster for JJ Taylor. He needs to have some bigger moments, I think, to make this team and solidify that spot on the team.
I just did the numbers real quick.
Do it
on at-large spots. So you tell me if I'm too high or too low on any of these.
Okay.
This is not the Patriots. This is any NFL team. I think 2 quarterbacks minimum, right? We agree on that. 3 running backs minimum. 4 wide receivers. Maybe you could argue 3, but I think 4 minimum wide receivers. You're not keeping more than 2. You're not keeping less than 2 tight ends. You're gonna have 2 tight ends, even though the Patriots kept 1. That was ridiculous. No fullbacks. I think 7 offensive linemen is the minimum. You're not going to see a team keep 6 on the 53. Maybe 6 active on the game day 46. 5. This is assuming 3-4. 5 defensive linemen. Your 3 starters, backup end, backup tackle. 6 linebackers, your 4 starters, backup middle, backup outside, 4 corners, 3 safeties, kicker, punter, long snapper. Any of those numbers an issue to you?
No, I think that's pretty accurate, right? I mean, how many corners did you mention? 3?
3 corners, yep. Or no, 4 corners.
4 corners, yeah, okay. Yeah, then I'm good with it.
Okay, so that means there are 39 auto spots on the roster. There are 39 spots that those are not to be won in between positions. Those are purely in position. Let's say for the sake of the Patriots, Matthew Slater, Cody Davis, Justin Bethel. You had 3 more. We'll call them special teams. Okay. So then that brings you up to 42. There are 42 spots on the 53-man roster that cannot be won outside your position. That means there are 11 spots that the Patriots, we'll call them depth spots, at-large spots, depth spots. There are 11 spots where the Patriots can say, regardless of position, let's just keep the next best 11 players.
Right.
And those are the spot. But, a guy with the depth at linebacker, a guy like Juwan Bentley might be in one of those 11 spots right now. Let me go back and look at this here. So Brian Hoyer's taking up one of those spots right now, because he has to keep 3 quarterbacks because of COVID. Brandon Bolden's taking up one of those spots right now. N'Keal Harry's in one of those spots right now. So is Christian Wilkerson, if you have him making it. Devin Asiasi's in one of those spots right now. I think maybe Carl Davis, certainly if he makes it, is in one of those spots right now. So you basically have 11 spots to figure out what you're doing with those extra players, and that's where JJ Taylor fits in. So a little fun with numbers there. If anybody could follow any of what I said, we
need a whiteboard. We really do need a whiteboard, because then we can draw up plays. We can draw up our little diagrams here that we get into, and Alex can draw up all of his math, and you can see the crazy come out with all the things that Alex texts me about and says, how about this idea? And
did that make any sense? Did that make any sense?
It did. Okay. I'm just teasing you. All right. I want to talk about 2 more players before we wrap this up. N'Keal Harry and Adrian Phillips. Let's talk about Harry for a second. And I mentioned it earlier on the throw to Cam kind of overshot Harry on in the deep post. And I kind of made this joke already, but I'm going to make it again. N'Keal Harry blew by an NFL cornerback. Now, I don't know if Michael Jackson's a true NFL cornerback, but
you're going to roll your eyes at me at this.
He might make the team.
He's had 2 decent days here. I don't know that he did anything before this. He had an interception, 2 pass breakups yesterday. He had a pass breakup today.
Yeah.
It's 2 days, but if there's a time to pick to get hot, heading into the first preseason game is it. So
it is starting to click a little bit more for Michael Jackson, and I would say it's certainly clicked more for him on the whole than it has for Juwan Williams, right? Yes. Like it definitely looks a little bit better than Juwan Williams does in these practices. Regardless, N'Keal Harry blew by Michael Jackson, And then he also beat Jalen Mills in one-on-ones earlier in practice on a nice comeback route. We're sort of stacking these days together where we're coming on the podcast and we're saying on Sunday we didn't do the show following the practice on Sunday. On Sunday he had the diving catch, right, in one-on-ones on Juwan Williams in the corner of the end zone on a ball from Cam, lays out, makes a beautiful catch going out the back of the end zone. The padded practice before that, which I believe was Thursday, he had a huge practice. I think he had like 5 or 6 catches in team drills in that practice. So we're just continuously seeing improvements from N'Keal Harry. And just at this point, it's not even improvements. It's just stacking the days together, right? Of every day being a factor out there. And I just watched him run some routes today, even just on routes that he wasn't getting the football. And you see a much more explosive athlete, especially coming off the line of scrimmage. He's actually moving off the line of scrimmage now, right? Like he's actually gaining some steam and gaining some explosiveness off his release, which is really good to see as well. I get that Mike Jackson and Juwan Williams aren't Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson. We'll see if he can do it against that level of corner once the games really start. But I'm a guy that's always been a believer in N'Keal Harry, so maybe I'm not the right guy to ask. But at the same time, I want to keep him. I think the Patriots should keep him because I do not want to see – he's starting to put it together.
Who are you keeping him over?
I'm just saying he's starting to put it together. And what's going to end up happening, I'm telling you now, is they're going to trade him and he's going to end up playing well for his next team.
But that's going to happen regardless. That's because they've used him wrong. We've talked about this. It's on them. They didn't use him correctly. They've held him back. He was always going to play well in the next spot. He's going to leave soon. You don't necessarily have a roster spot for him. Sell high. Now's the chance. You're going to get more for him now than you ever will.
Is how much does another team, one of the other 31 teams, really read into all this training camp buzz with N'Keal Harry? And how much does that really inflate his stock? Now, the team that they're going to play against next week in joint practices and preseason games, the Philadelphia Eagles, they drafted Devontae Smith. They drafted Jalen Reagor, right, the year before that. They still kind of need wide receiver help, right? Yeah. So if he has a really good a couple practices in Philly, then maybe the Eagles are a team that comes calling. The Giants, I think, have a okay receiver depth, but something's telling me that they could use another receiver as well.
They tried Kelvin Benjamin, and he didn't work out. Same kind of receiver in theory.
These are teams that maybe they'll see N'Keal Harry up close and personal. Washington doesn't necessarily need receivers. They got a couple of good ones already, but these teams that are going to see N'Keal Harry in person, right? Maybe they will start to read some of those tea leaves and read some of the press clippings and say, oh, the light might be coming on for N'Keal Harry. I don't know. This is the best he's ever looked. By far. I think we can all safely say that. Whether he's going to do it against NFL competition in an NFL game and put up 100 yards in a game or whatever, it remains to be seen. But it's clearly the best that he's looked.
So this is, again, why I'm saying sell high. He's not going to have any more value than he does right now.
So the question really boils down to, you mentioned who is he in competition? Who could he be in on the right? Are you really keeping Christian Wilkerson at this point over N'Keal Harry? Because I think that's really what we're talking about here.
So, am I? I really like what I've seen from N'Keal. Bill's going to keep the guy who wants to play all 4 special teams phases instead of 21 special team snaps over 2 years. Let's be honest. It's not what I would do. It's what Bill would do.
Right.
Bill's going to keep the special. For the 4th wide receiver on the depth chart, Bill's going to keep the special teams guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a really tough time, especially just there. I'm not
saying it's easy to.
You have to factor in a little bit. You have to factor in a little bit that this guy was a 1st-round pick, right? Like, and I'm not saying that that's the end-all, be-all, and you have to keep him because of sunken cost and stuff like that. But it's at least a factor, right, in the equation that you invested a lot in this player, not only with the pick, but also since then, probably in terms of practice time and reps and all just kind of just effort, right? And to get this player to work out. He's starting to finally figure it out and turn a corner. I don't know. It's hard to just give up on a player like that.
So I know this isn't quite apples to apples, and I know that there's a little bit of a difference between a first-round pick and a second-round pick. Duke Dawson was the 56th overall pick.
Yeah.
He was traded a year later for a 6th-round pick. They'll give up on him if they don't believe in him. And if they believed in him, I don't think you would have had that nonsense with the trade request.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Christian Wilkerson's had a nice camp. Don't get me wrong, but maybe this is we keep on picking on this poor guy. Maybe this is a little bit of the Maurice Harris thing for me,
but it's not.
Right, I don't want to fall. I don't want to fall for the training camp star, right? The training camp breakout player that nobody's ever heard of, that just comes on in training camp and has some good practices and makes some plays in camp, and we all get all juiced up and excited for Christian Wilkerson, and then when it turns out that he's a borderline NFL player in the coaching staff's eyes.
But I don't think that's what this is. I really don't think that's what Wilkerson is, because it's not about, oh, look at this guy making all these catches. It's basic stuff. He's just a guy who seems very technically sound. And again, a lot of it, if it was just Christian Wilkerson doing what he's doing as a wide receiver, I'd agree with you. I would say, okay, this is us getting hyped up over some guy because he's beating the back corners on the depth chart, and that's what it is. He's emphatic about wanting to play all 4 special teams phases. He is working one-on-one with Matthew Slater on a regular basis. Slater has raved about him.
Yeah,
that's what this is. This isn't, hey, look at the
kicking game thing is going to have them trade a guy that has real talent in N'Keal Harry. That's just killer. That's a killer.
But couldn't you see, again, like, was Duke Dawson not a talented player? Duke Dawson.
No. Duke Dawson hasn't done anything in
He's
Denver.
Stuck on the roster. He's stuck on the roster for 3 years there.
That's fair.
So he's clearly doing something. And I think a lot of Belichick, I've talked about this before, as unpredictable as people like to say Bill Belichick is, when you do something for 22 years, patterns develop. And what the patterns tell me are they are going to find a way to keep Christian Wilkerson on the roster.
The patterns tell you that they're going to take the guy that wants to play his role and play the 4th wide receiver role and play in the kicking game, 4 or 5 different units potentially, and be active on game day because he's going to play on special teams and be a backup Z receiver to Jacoby Myers and Bourne and Aguilar, and they're going to mix and match that group. So I always get confused as to who's what spot. But point being, N'Keal's a true X, and he's playing now like a true X. And I think Aguilar is going to be their starting X at the end of the day, but he's more of a guy that I would like to see them be able to move around a little bit, because when you move him inside the formation, I think he is going to be able to create big plays off of deep crossing routes and stuff like that from a condensed split or inside the formation. He's the only guy that gives them size and explosiveness on the outside, period, in the wide receiver room, right? Like, he's the only guy, unless they're going to start throwing Henry and Jonnu Smith out there. And I would even say Henry, who's really, really good for other reasons, not so much the most explosive guy, right? He's not coming off the line and really testing coverage in that sense. And I've seen it from N'Keal this summer that he's actually exploding off the line of scrimmage a little bit and creating some speed down the field. I don't know. So if they trade N'Keal Harry and keep Christian Wilkerson, it's the most Belichick thing ever, and it's classic Bill. But if they do that, then I'm going to be a little bit bummed out, because I think N'Keal Harry's got potential.
So first off, I would say, isn't it our job, at least what I try to do, I'm not telling you what I would do, because that ultimately doesn't matter. I'm not the one making the decisions. I'm here telling you what I think the team will do based on how the team has acted. So again, you're not necessarily disagreeing with me. You're just saying that it's an unfortunate outcome. I would say too, you talked about the Maurice Harris effect and not wanting to get caught up on the hot wide receiver of training camp. Isn't that N'Keal Harry?
But N'Keal Harry is a first-round pick. N'Keal Harry, we know, has physical God-given talent, right? Like, we know that N'Keal Harry is a talented football player. It just hasn't all clicked for him at the NFL level. Christian Wilkerson is the definition of the guy that we talk about this time of year, right? He's Maurice Harris. He's that player, right? I can't think of another example, so we keep on.
Well, I can't think of another one. Jacoby Myers. Myers maybe he is more. Maybe he is more Jacob ends up. We'll have to wait and see. I guess he ends up being more of that. I guess my point is, and this is somewhat of a disingenuous argument, but I'm going to make it anyway. If the Patriots signed some former first round pick or traded for some former first round pick who had fallen off with this team and was brought in and was doing what N'Keal's doing, we'd be talking about, all right, like, yeah, can he do it again? Like, we'd be questioning it. We'd be questioning it a ton. And obviously that's not what they did. N'Keal was already here, but you talk about how can you be so into Christian Wilkerson when all he's really shown you is 2 good weeks of camp. I could ask you the same about N'Keal Harry. How can you be so into N'Keal Harry when all he's really shown you is 2 good weeks of camp? I'm not saying cut N'Keal Harry. I'm not saying he's a bad player. They by no means should let him go for nothing.
Sure.
If it's cut him or keep him, you keep him and you figure something else out. I do think he's a good player. I'm just saying what this team does historically, what it looks like they are trying to do with the roster. You can keep Wilkerson, who this team clearly likes, and then you can get something for N'Keal Harry. And that's the other thing that's lost in this. They don't have a ton of early day 3 picks next year because they've moved them in various trades. And they like those picks. If N'Keal Harry plays like this in the preseason, you can probably get a top 150 pick for him. You might be able to trade into a contender for a 4th round pick. I think you could certainly trade into a bad team for a 5th round pick. So that's the other part of the equation is we know next year's draft is absolutely loaded, right? We saw it this year. Teams are hoarding picks in that draft.
Right.
You're not losing N'Keal Harry for nothing. You're not totally giving up on the investment. You're not getting the return for the investment that you wanted, but you're not losing him. And the other thing somebody said, Wilkerson could be snuck to the practice squad. I don't know about that.
I'm not sold on it either. I mean, it depends on how much they show him, right? It depends on how much they show him off in the preseason, or not. Because if you put him up against 3rd and 4th corners in preseason games, he's beating guys like Jalen Mills, J.C. Jackson in practice a little bit as well. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen now. Lastly, I want to talk about Adrian Phillips because this has been the summer of Adrian Phillips, right? Like this is as good as I think anybody could ever have expected Adrian Phillips to look. Today, another interception, a big pass breakup in the end zone on a seam ball from Johnny Smith or from Cam Newton to Johnny Smith. He's got to be up to something like a dozen pass breakups in coverage so far in training camp through 11 days. He has been lockdown, like lights out on both Hunter Henry and Jonnu. I didn't see this coming. I knew Adrian Phillips was a good football player, but I didn't quite see this level coming. He has really been the star of training camp so far. Not obviously by name recognition, but just in terms of the way that he has played. I would say been the best player on the field, especially in the defensive backfield, I would say.
Yeah, he's been excellent. And you see what I have talked about this before. That extra year of experience, he's been in the system now, right? And he knows what he's doing. And he talked about how helpful that's been. Having that opportunity, he's really able to unlock what he's doing. And he was a good player with the Chargers. Like, I think he played on some bad Chargers teams. I think he maybe flew under and one of them made the playoffs, but they weren't really a good team.
Yeah.
I think he flew under the radar with Chargers a little bit. And then he came in here last year and he had essentially learned a new position and he handled it well. I mean, he said that he was still learning things partway through the year, but he feels comfortable now. He feels confident. You can see it. I mean, he's been excellent day to day, like consistently. It's not like he flashed for a couple days and then disappeared and then flashed again. No, every single day he's going out there and he's making plays.
Yeah, he has made play after play after play against Jonnu, against Hunter Henry. This is not like he's going up against David Wells and Matt Lacoste and Devin Asiasi and making these plays, right? He's going up against the 2 big ticket free agent signings for the Patriots and making these plays. The other thing that I love about this is that if Adrian Phillips is going to sort of develop more so into like a Patrick Chung type player for them, where he's going to guard tight ends, maybe play some strong safety, I think this is really going to allow Kyle Duggar to just do what I've been pounding the table for and just kind of roam around a little bit more and not necessarily be pigeonholed to covering tight ends. If Adrian Phillips can do it at a high level, I love the idea of playing Kyle Duggar either at that money backer position or moving him back into the secondary and having him play as sort of another deep safety opposite of Devin McCourty, right? And being able to move him around a little bit. But I love the idea of Kyle Duggar being sort of a chess piece for Bill Belichick and Adrian Phillips kind of being put into that role as that Patrick Chung has left behind. And I think that's going to be very good for the Patriots if they can do that with their secondary. I think that's going to be get the best out of all of these players, right? I think Kyle Duggar is more natural in that role as sort of a roamer, as a free kind of player in the middle of the defense. And I think that Adrian Phillips is a really good cover guy, it turns out. And he has just been great so far, all of training camp, making plays left and right. So it'll be fun to see him out there as well. I think that about does it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on? I think we covered it pretty good there. The Patriots, as Alex mentioned, as he's thinking about this, is they'll be back out at practice on Tuesday. You said at 4 now instead of 3:30. Yep. That one's in the stadium, right? So that one will be an in-stadium practice, but it is still open to everybody. It's open to the entire public. So if you want to come out to Patriots practice tomorrow, 4 o'clock inside Gillette Stadium, they've been in pads for 2 straight days. I don't know if they'll put pads on for 3 straight days, especially with the game on Thursday. So we'll probably get a non-padded practice tomorrow afternoon, but still it'll be worth it. It was a fun time on Friday night. Fans in the stands again. It was at least it's kind of a sense of normalcy almost to have the atmosphere back. So tomorrow night in the stadium, obviously Thursday night in Gillette Stadium as well, the opener against Washington in terms of preseason games. Alex and I are going to have you covered. We're going to do preview podcast on Wednesday. We're going to do a recap podcast on Friday after Thursday night's preseason opener against Washington. I'm really fascinated to see how much the starters play on Thursday night because we've been 11 training camp practices in. You only have 4 padded practices so far, Alex. Like they don't have a ton of live reps yet in training camp. So maybe we will see some more of the starters.
Yeah, I think so. And, there's been instances where coaches will talk and kind of agree how intense they want the preseason game to be in terms of like how much you're using starters and all that. And Ron Rivera already came out and said he's going to play his guys. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's been a little communication between him and Bill. And, if I had to guess, quarter and change for the Patriots offensive starters, I think they play the first quarter and then give them one more drive just to get used to the quarter change and going the other way. But we'll see. There's going to be a game where they play a full half, I think. Might be the second, might be the third. I don't think it's going to be this one, but it might be. Bill might just want to get it over with and be done. The one other point I did want to make, which was interesting, is we finally got to ask Bill. We did offense and defense. We finally got to ask Bill Belichick about Quinn Nordin today. And I mean, it was interesting. He was complimentary, but he did, something he said that stood out to me. He hasn't really been tested. It was ideal conditions in the stadium. There wasn't much of a pass rush. And that tells me they're not totally sold on him yet. And we don't know what's wrong with Nick Folk, what his issue is, why he's not practicing. But I'm not, I think after that practice, a lot of people were ready to kind of make the call that Nordin's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. And I love to jump all over the rookie UDFA kickers, right? You know me, but the door's still open, certainly, but I'm not ready to go there yet and say that Nordin's past Folk. I still think he's got a ways to go. Yeah,
I would agree with that as well. And Belichick was typical Belichick fashion with Quinn Nordin, right? Give him a compliment sandwich, right? You give him a compliment, then you tell him he sucks, then you give him another compliment, right? So there's still some growing there to do with Quinn Nordin. But as I mentioned, Alex and I will be back definitely on Wednesday. If there's an eventful practice tomorrow night, we'll hop on here and do another breakdown of Tuesday's practice. I know Alex is going to want to do one, so maybe we'll sneak one in tomorrow night as well.
We should.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be back soon to break down everything that's happening down there at training camp, and also Thursday night preseason opener 98.5 the Sports Hub for Alex with his coverage, CLNSmedia.com as always for my coverage. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, and Evan Lazar. I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you soon.